In the United States of America, there are approximately 37 million people who hold hunting licenses, which is roughly 11% of the entire population. These individuals typically hold great experience with the outdoors and are well acquainted with their hunting locations of choice. It's said that many of these people have an understanding of rural areas that many do not, so when one of these experienced individuals goes missing without a trace, it's made that much stranger. Massive search efforts are put together to find the missing, with sensitive thermal imaging equipment, highly trained search dog teams, and in some cases, thousands of people who go out to scour the area. When these efforts not only fail, but don't provide a single clue or trace as to the missing's whereabouts, it raises some very strange questions. With that being said, let's talk about the first disappearance. Emerson Carver, otherwise known as Red by his friends, took a trip with his brother-in-law, Ralph, to hunt for turkeys in the mountains of Robertsdale, Pennsylvania. During the afternoon of the 11th of November, the pair found themselves on a field just off an old logging road on Broadtop Mountain. At approximately 2 p.m, the men decided to split up to cover more ground in the hopes of finding more game. They each took a different route through the thick woods with the plan of meeting back at Red's truck later during the day. Later during the afternoon, just before it started to get dark, Ralph came out of the woods and made it back to the car alone. At first, he didn't think much of it and waited patiently, assuming that Red was just finishing up. However, when the darkness soon started to set in, Ralph began to panic, fearing that Red may have gotten lost, so he fired 6 rounds from his gun in an attempt to allow Red to locate him. After the reverberations had finished, however, Ralph was left with a still, ominous silence. At this point, Ralph nervously left to get help. Unfortunately, by the time authorities learned of the disappearance and were able to organise, it was far too dark to begin the search operation. Instead, this time was spent forming the search parties and coordinating the plan. At this point, I'd like to read a short extract from publicopinion.com. For almost 2 weeks, more than 1,800 people would search 12 square miles of woods for Red. Volunteers walked arm in arm through rugged terrain, 2 different types of search dogs were brought in and even scuba divers. Even a helicopter was brought in from neighbouring Letterkenny Army Depot with heat-seeking technology. This search effort failed and the search and rescue teams were left feeling bewildered as they couldn't explain why the search didn't produce even a single result. Red's daughter, Janice, said, "We thought for sure the dogs would find something, but they didn't. No hat, no gun, no body." Red's wife, Ida, said that other hunters were in the area that afternoon as both Ralph and Red had seen them loading up turkeys into the back of their truck near the area they were going to hunt. However, it's important to note that there was no evidence that these men were responsible, and it's not clear that they remained in the area after loading their truck. In relation to Ralph, Ida said that the events of that day ended his days as a sportsman. She said, "Ralph would never go hunting again after that. He was really upset by it." All in all, this case remains unsolved and it is unclear what happened that day. Ralph never heard anything that would indicate that Red was in trouble, no shouting or gunshots. This experienced hunter just seemed to vanish without a trace. What happened to Emerson Carver? Now, let's go even further back in time to the 16th of September 1941. Before we get into this incident, I want to say that this was by far the most disastrous hunting trip I have come across, and things only go from bad to worse. 65-year-old Luke Kuykendall, alongside his 2 good friends, Earl and Vetter, met up in Sacramento. The trio had planned a hunting trip at Balch Camp, which was roughly a 2-hour drive to the east from their location. The camp itself was located near Sugar Pine Hill. I want to make it clear that Luke was not a completely healthy man and suffered from a heart problem which severely limited his mobility in the mountains. As a result of this, on the 16th of September, Earl and Vetter went out to hunt deer while Luke stayed to maintain the camp. During this time, another hunter burst into the camp and made Luke aware that Earl had accidentally been shot by Vetter and needed medical supplies. Luke, this fellow hunter, and a group of hunters then made their way back into the woods and towards the scene. An article by the Fresno Bee written on October the 1st, 1941 explains what happened next. Luke's companions said they dissuaded him from continuing with them because they thought the trip was too much for him. They left him sitting on the trail 200 yards from the camp, which was also in sight of the camp. That was the last time he was seen. As the group came back from their rescue attempt, they realised that Luke wasn't there. Initially, they didn't think much of it as Earl had passed away as a result of his wounds, though the search for Luke was initiated by the group fairly quickly. At this point, let's quickly reiterate the circumstances of this hunt. Earl and Vetter left camp together where Earl was accidentally killed by Vetter, who mistook him for a deer. A hunter reaches Luke, who then goes missing while trying to get to Earl and Vetter to provide medical care. This was an absolute mess, and I've never heard anything quite like it before. This search effort failed, and Luke was not located. Authorities were notified, and the real search effort began. Luke's sons assisted the rangers and told them that because of his health conditions, he couldn't have travelled far from the initial disappearance location. Many volunteers got involved and were led by the rangers themselves. At some point during the search, a single boot print was found 3 miles away, which was thought that it could belong to Luke, though the son suggested that he couldn't have travelled that far by himself. The search was large and lasted for 13 days before standing down, and they found absolutely no sign of him at all. In fact, the article by Fresno Bee expresses the searchers' confusion. They state, "The searchers said that Luke apparently vanished as if he had sunk into the ground. No trace of him having been found in a month's minute, and widespread search in the vicinity of the hunting camp from which he vanished." The searchers were obviously confused as to why they couldn't find him. David Polida states, "This was an elderly man with a heart problem. He should have been found." And he's absolutely right. There were no signs of animal predation, which would have been obvious if that were the case. No screams or shouts were ever heard, and nothing to indicate that anything was wrong with Luke. He vanished quickly, leaving no trace behind at all, which caused confusion among the rangers, volunteers, and his sons. So the question remains, where is Luke, and what in the world happened to him? What do you think happened here? Moving on, let's explore another case. Lee Peltier, who was 59 at the time of his disappearance, was a man of great experience when it comes to the outdoors. He was an avid hiker and often went hunting on the 100-acre family farm where he lived in Lake Elmo. It was his experience and lack of any clues as to his whereabouts that make this disappearance all the more unsettling. It was a very cold November the 3rd, 2018 when Lee and 3 of his friends, including John Warner, who was one of the owners of the cabin where they were staying, made the trip to Namaji State Forest in Minnesota. On the day of Lee's disappearance, Lee and John headed towards a nearby pond where the plan was simple. Lee was going to walk to a slightly higher elevation on the cliff and flush any deer out that were drinking from the pond, which in turn would send them running towards John. However, after waiting for some time, no deer ever came John's way, who was left feeling somewhat confused, although he didn't think much of it as he thought that Lee may have simply been trailing a deer. It is common practice among hunters to fire 3 shots into the sky to alert others that they are in trouble. These warning shots never came. Lunchtime arrived and Lee still hadn't made it back to the cabin. Hours passed and dusk arrived, followed by dark, and it was at this point that the 3 men were in panic mode. There was no mobile phone service in the area, so the men built a large bonfire and listened out for gunshots. It was raining at the time, which progressively worsened until it started snowing and temperatures dropped to 21 degrees Fahrenheit. It was these conditions that forced the men to begin their search early the next morning, but they couldn't make sense of what had happened, and after the search proved to be unsuccessful, they drove until they could find phone service. 5 officers arrived at the cabin and searched on foot and by ATV until dark, but they also could not locate him. Hundreds of searchers arrived and began to scour the forest to no avail. According to Fox9.com, the search included the Pine and St. Louis County Sheriff's Department, the North Star K9 search team, and the DNR. On foot, on machine, and in the air, crews swept the area with no success. At first, it was thought that Lee may have fallen into the water, but his phone provider showed that Lee had made 3 calls at 1:40 p.m. directed to his 3 friends, but his phone didn't die until 5:30 a.m. the following morning. Lee's daughter, Megan, said, "If he had gone into the water on Saturday, his phone would have died well before then because the phone would have been damaged. It's so hard and confusing because you think one thing makes sense and then it doesn't." She continued, "To have seen no trace of him whatsoever, to have no sign of him, is so bizarre. He's been hunting all his life, he grew up on a farm, he loved the outdoors. He would have known to fire his gun. If he were going to take cover, he would have found a cave or something, he would have left a clue outside, he'd have left some sign." So the question remains, where is Lee Peltier? This is a man of great experience who had been hunting all his life, who managed to disappear without a trace. What do you think happened here? On the 8th of September 1966, the Reno Evening Gazette posted an article in their newspaper about a 28-year-old missing hunter by the name of Anthony Granata. The article opens by saying, "A Reno mother of 4 whose husband has been missing on an Alaskan hunting trip for about 20 days says she will never give up hope." Mrs. Granata, 27, told the Gazette today that she is confident her husband can handle himself in the wilderness country of the rugged Wrangell Mountains. According to Wikipedia.org, the Wrangell Mountains are a high mountain range of eastern Alaska in the United States. Much of the range is included in Wrangell-St. Elias National Park and Preserve. The Wrangell Mountains are almost entirely volcanic in origin, and they include the 2nd and 3rd highest volcanoes in the United States, Mount Blackburn and Mount Sanford. The range takes its name from Mount Wrangell, which is one of the largest andesite shield volcanoes in the world, and also the only presently active volcano in the range. This is a very remote area, well out of the way of civilization, and Anthony made the trip from his hometown of Reno all the way to this isolated area by himself on the 10th of August 1966. Anthony's plan was to hunt for sheep and goats, which was successful. Anthony returned from his hunt on the mountain back to the place he was staying in McCarthy, which is a very small population of people 10 miles south from the mountain. However, because he was so weighed down by his catch, he had to leave his gear up on the mountain with the intention of retrieving them. He told a man that he met in the community named Howard that he was going back up to retrieve his gear and would be back by the 18th of August by the latest, but Anthony would never return. It's at this point that Howard rang the authorities and the search effort would begin. The Air Force put together a search team and scoured the mountain for him for 2 days, but gave up, stating that they couldn't find a trace of him. It's at this point that Anthony's younger brother, Archie, arrived in Alaska and began his own private search with a guide. Archie did find evidence of Anthony's presence. While searching the area, he and his guide found a matchbook from a Reno establishment, footprints, and some shell casings. It was this finding that encouraged the Air Force to resume their search and dropped an 18-man Army mountain climbing team on the mountain. This search was coupled with an Army helicopter and a ski plane from the Alaska Air National Guard. Mrs. Granata stated, "Anthony's the kind of guy who is completely aware of the elements. He is in good physical condition and very level-headed. He isn't the kind of person who would panic. If anyone would hold true and think things out, he would." By all accounts, Anthony was an accomplished outdoorsman and hunter. The search had continued for some time, and at this point it was now early September, and the armed forces said that they had covered 40 square miles in their search and couldn't believe that they didn't locate him. Archie was also equally confused, and he described the area as a barren wasteland and a body should stick out like a sore thumb, as there was very little foliage in the area and a body would not have been obscured. On September the 6th, the Nevada State Journal reported that private helicopter searches were also taking place over the mountain led by Archie, who did not want to give up on the search for his brother. But time was running out and the armed forces began to pull out as no further traces of him were found. David Paulides describes this case as a true mystery. On the 13th of June 1970, the Fairbanks Daily reported, "A prospector has found what is believed to be the remains of a Reno, Nevada man who disappeared while hunting goats in the Wrangell Mountains in September of 1966. The missing man was identified as Anthony Granata. The prospector, who was unidentified, found some camping gear and a diary belonging to Granata near a decomposed body." Paulides asks a very important question. How searchers missed Anthony's body is the million-dollar question. Given that the area was a barren wasteland and highly visible according to Archie, why couldn't the search locate his body, especially from an aerial perspective? What do you think? I'd just like to take a moment to thank all of you that have subscribed to the channel and who share these videos, like them, and just generally show support. I appreciate it a lot and I can't thank you enough. I'd also like to say thank you to my patrons for supporting me over at Patreon, so thank you to Joshua M. Sundheimer, Ophelia Gray, Rebecca Simpson, Kirky Jones, Math Bowers, Natasha Smith, Gail Fuata, Justin Dean Allen, JenJ71, Benjamin Sereno, Zia Teasdale, CEO AG Music, David Miller, Tom S., Wendy Boiler, Matthew Critchley, and Devon Hartman. I hope I didn't butcher anyone's name too much. Anyway, do let me know what you thought of this one, and you'll find all of the sources and links in the description below. There's also a link to buy David's Missing 411 books, so be sure to check that out. As always, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, it helps me a lot. I hope that you have a great day, or evening depending on where you are. Be safe guys, and I'll catch you soon. Peace.